What's going on, guys? Dan Watson, learningcameras.com, and I've got the brand new Canon 5D Mark IV, and I want to show you a little bit on how I set up my camera. This camera has a lot of functionality inside of it, so I just wanted to show you the main things that I do when I first get my camera and begin to set it up. So we'll take a walk through the menu. I'm not going to look at all of these menu items because it just gets really complex, but I'll take a look at some of the basics that I always do. Typically, your camera image quality comes in a JPEG, so I switch that to RAW. Dual pixel RAW really doesn't do very much on this camera. Maybe a separate video will show that. I typically disable my beeps. I do not use any kind of lens controls to correct anything. I typically turn those off. I know some people who like them. I just haven't seen any massive benefits, and sometimes it can slow down the camera. So also, I always make sure things like my release shutter without card are off, just in case I ever forgot to put a card or something like that, that those would never fire. Exposure compensation, nothing. I don't do auto ISO almost never, so I really don't touch that at all either. I pretty much turn off all of these features as well, so all of those will go off. I typically shoot auto white balance though, so that kind of stays the same. Every so often I'll correct it, but right now I did not, so that's staying the same. Nothing really there. Picture style, I like neutral. I kind of customize things a little bit, and so I just want a little bit less contrast and things like that inside the image, and I'll correct that in Lightroom to get a nice final image. I turn off all of this stuff as well, and nothing really interesting there. Okay, so live view autofocus is a little bit different now. We do have good autofocus on this camera, so I typically use the FlexiZone AF, and I'll basically pick my focus points and do it that way. So if I hop into video mode, I can trigger my focus points wherever I want, and that will be where I will focus. So touch shutter, no, none of that's really interesting. All right, so here's where we get to some of the interesting stuff here. So I use Case 2. You can customize all of this stuff. I use this because I typically am shooting weddings and I want to track the bride as she's moving, and I want it to mostly ignore other obstacles in the way. But there are tons of choices on here, but that's the one that typically fits my use. It's not the default. I believe the Case 1 is the default. So I typically will put it there. I also set my images to the focus priority for focus. I'm not sure why you would only want AF in there. I've never tested it to see if you put speed and not on focus, if it will shoot out of focus images, but just seems to me to be a no-brainer to shoot with it, priority being focus. And again, nothing really interesting on these. So I select only my cross type points. This camera has so many focus points, and usually all of the ones that I'm going to need to use are going to fall within those cross type points, and they're the best and most accurate and fastest to focus on. So I will typically prioritize those. And okay, so I do use, these are the focus types that I use. I almost never use these expanding AF areas just because I'm usually picking my focus point and then setting my subject right there, and I'm not tracking objects moving across the frame or anything like that one. So I'm going to pick my focus point, and those are the tools that I use to choose it with. And you know, really nothing here. This is how you can control everything for that. Honestly, I haven't set that on this camera. Orientation, length, autofocus, not really important. And let's see, anything else interesting there? Not really. And nothing too much here. Okay, I'm going to skip. So honestly, I do not change any of my playback settings at all. I keep them all the same. The only one that I'll typically change is magnification. Sometimes in this right now it's set to 2x. A lot of times I'll set it to 4x from the center, but that's the only one. So I have my recording functionality to set to multiple records. So I was recording cards to both, or recording raw files to both of my cards, and I use that for duplication. That's typically the way that I will run things. Nothing interesting here. And again, okay, so here's where we start getting into most of the customization, how I set up the camera. The exposure level, these are all, I think on this camera, they were actually set to 1/3, but on the 5D Mark III, I believe they were not. They were set to half stop on that one, so kind of an interesting thing there. Bracketing, I don't do it a whole lot, but when I do a 0 minus plus is what I do, and I typically shoot 3. I'm not one to be shooting 5 or 7, and I'm not bracketing that much anyway. And so most of your controls on this one are going to be in these custom controls right here. Now, I do not shoot back button focus. I could actually go in a whole speech for that, but I don't think anyone should be shooting back button autofocus on these cameras anymore. There was a time and a place for that, and there was a 5D Mark II after that. I really think it should be controlled by picking your focus point and then moving that towards the subject and then autofocusing with the shutter button. But you can do whatever you want, I guess. So I actually set my AF button, turn my AF on. Most of the time, almost about 99.9% of the time, I am focusing with my shutter button. Every so often, I'm going to want to focus and recompose, and so I will focus, hold down my AF button, and then keep that, and then I can recompose and hold that AF down. I do not change my AE lock. That's the same. I use my depth of preview button for AI servo, switching between servo and one shot, because when I have a bride and all of a sudden she's standing still and then all of a sudden she decides to move, that way all I have to do is hold down this button, and you can see that my one shot here changes to servo. And if I go into photo mode, it's actually going to be a little bit better. So my one shot and my servo are going to be changing as soon as I hold down that button. And so that's going to allow me to track much easier. I love that setting, and not every camera has it, so that's something that's really important to me. Don't change that one at all. I didn't change that one on this camera at all. And I keep my set button on the zoom so I can quickly zoom into my subject. TV, AV, that's all the same. Okay, so this one, I do set my multi-controller right here to be able to choose my AF point on the fly. And I have set this brand new button that we have right here, and this one I have set to ISO. So now I can hold this down and just scroll, and my ISO changes. Before, I would have to hit the button up here for ISO, and yeah. And I don't like these buttons up on top because it's very difficult to tell which one you're touching, and so, you know, when I'm shooting, sometimes I'll be aiming for ISO and accidentally hit this one. And so I like having it here now that I can do this. It's nice, convenient, and it works very well. So that was a new thing for the 5D Mark IV that I like a lot. So that's all of those. I think that's going to be it. I don't really touch anything else in there. So yeah, so that's a wrap up. That's kind of how I set up the camera. That's how I control the new button right there. I wish we had more options for controlling these. I never use the rate button, and all you can use that for is rate and lock, really. So that's kind of a stupid button for me. Also, that's a stupid button for me. So I really wish we had some more customization on some of those buttons over there. Maybe making them to control my audio levels for video, or some other video functionality would be nice. I don't know, something we could find for Canon to do on that one. Overall, the entire camera controls are pretty much the same versus all of the other ones. And so you really don't have a whole lot of differences between cameras. So this is all going to look very, very familiar if you're coming from a 5D Mark III, which is what I'm coming from as well. So the lock button, I honestly don't lock it very often. Usually I will set it to control this, and I have not set it right now, but that's typically what I will set it. Actually, right now I have it set to lock the touchscreen. And that was actually important. I used to have this lock this wheel, but I almost never used it. But I actually find that there are times that I do not want a touchscreen, so I really like being able to set this lock button to lock that touchscreen. So that's another thing that I use a lot. And I think that's it. So yeah, that's how I set up the 5D Mark IV. I'm going to have a full review on this, so keep up with me there. And if you have any questions on this camera, I know now we can have Lightroom, so I'm going to have some pictures coming up now that I can edit my RAW files in Lightroom. So stay tuned for a bunch of stuff coming up in the full review.